Diplomacy has officially reached its expiration date in the Middle East. The air is no longer filled with the hope of mediators, but with the cold, metallic scent of impending kinetic reality. When Tehran officially accused the United States of violating the framework of the current deal and branded the ceasefire terms as unreasonable, it wasn't a temper tantrum. It was a strategic pivot. In the world of great power realism, words are merely placeholders until the artillery is in position. Iran has just signaled that the era of strategic patience is over. The shadow war is stepping into the light. For months, the world watched as a delicate dance of back-channel negotiations tried to prevent a regional conflagration. But those channels are now clogged with the debris of failed promises and broken red lines. To understand why Iran is walking away from the table, you have to look past the political rhetoric and look at the map. You have to look at the silos, the radar signatures, and the logistical pipelines. For Tehran, a ceasefire under the current American terms isn't a path to peace. It is a strategic trap. It is an invitation to watch their regional influence be dismantled piece by piece while their hands are tied by a piece of paper. From a realist perspective, Iran has calculated that the cost of a ceasefire is now higher than the cost of a direct confrontation. They have seen their proxies in Gaza and Lebanon battered. They have seen their own soil violated by Israeli strikes. In the logic of hard power, if you do not strike back, you cease to be a player. You become a victim. The strategic context is stark. Israel has demonstrated a reach and a technical lethality that has rattled the leadership in Tehran. The decapitation of Hezbollah's leadership and the systematic destruction of Hamas's tunnels have shifted the regional balance. Iran's Ring of Fire strategy, designed to keep the conflict away from its own borders, is fraying. To restore the balance of power, Iran needs to prove that it can still inflict unacceptable damage. This is not about ideology. This is about the physics of deterrence. If the shield of the proxy is broken, the sword of the state must be unsheathed. Tehran's rejection of the ceasefire is the sound of that sword leaving its scabbard. Look at the geography of this crisis. Iran is a fortress of mountains and vast distances. Its strategic depth is its greatest asset. But that depth is being challenged by fifth-generation stealth fighters and long-range ballistic precision. On the other side, Israel is a high-tech island with no room for error. It has no strategic depth. It relies on absolute air superiority and a multi-layered missile defense system that is the most advanced in the world. However, every shield has a saturation point. Iran knows this. They aren't looking to win a conventional air war against the United States and Israel. They are looking to win a war of attrition. They are looking to prove that the cost of defending Israel is a bill that the American taxpayer and the Pentagon's logistics chain can no longer afford to pay. The initial developments are already in motion. Across the Shiite crescent, from the rugged valleys of Yemen to the plains of Iraq and the ruins of Syria, the command is being whispered, prepare. This is the mobilization of the axis of resistance in its most coordinated form. We are seeing a shift in Iranian posture. Their ballistic missile units, hidden deep within missile cities carved into the Zagros Mountains, have moved to a heightened state of readiness. These aren't just threats. These are assets being positioned for a saturation strike. The goal is simple: to overwhelm the Aegis systems, the THAAD batteries, and the Iron Dome in a single massive pulse of kinetic energy. Washington's reaction was swift and predictable, but it reveals a deepening vulnerability. The deployment of the THAAD, the Terminal High Altitude Area Defense System, directly into Israel, operated by American boots on the ground, is a massive escalation. It is a signal of support, yes, but it is also a confession. It is an admission that Israel's domestic defenses can no longer guarantee protection against a full-scale Iranian volley. By placing American soldiers at the radar screens, the U.S. has effectively removed the buffer between itself and Tehran. If an Iranian missile hits a THAAD battery and kills American service members, the logic of escalation becomes an unstoppable freight train. There will be no more proportional responses. There will only be the fire. The main escalation point will not be a single event, but a cascade. Imagine a scenario where Iran utilizes its most sophisticated drones to swarm Israeli radar arrays while simultaneously launching medium-range ballistic missiles from multiple launch points. This is the game of chicken, played with hypersonic velocities. Tehran is betting that the U.S. does not have the stomach for a third major war in the Middle East. They are betting that the logistical strain of supporting Ukraine and preparing for a potential conflict in the South China Sea has left the American eagle overstretched and weary. Every interceptor missile fired by an American destroyer in the Red Sea is a $1 million asset used to kill a $10,000 drone. In a war of attrition, that math leads to bankruptcy. But there is a strategic turning point that many are missing. It is the role of geography in the global economy. Iran holds the kill switch for the world's energy supply. The Strait of Hormuz is a narrow choke point through which 20% of the world's oil flows. If the kinetic conflict escalates, Iran doesn't need to defeat the U.S. Navy. They only need to make the Persian Gulf uninsurable. A few sunken tankers, a few sea mines, and a rain of anti-ship missiles from the Iranian coast would send global oil prices into the stratosphere. This is the ultimate escalate to de-escalate move. By threatening a global economic collapse, Iran forces the great powers to the table on Tehran's terms, not Washington's. The regional consequences are already reshaping the map. The Arab monarchies of the Gulf are watching with bated breath. They have spent decades under the American security umbrella, but they see the shadow of the Iranian missile reaching further every year. If the U.S. cannot protect its own assets or ensure the safety of the sea lanes, the regional balance of power will tilt toward Tehran. We are looking at a potential Finlandization of the Gulf. Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Qatar may decide that a cold peace with a dominant Iran is safer than a hot war alongside a retreating America. This would be a geopolitical earthquake, ending 80 years of Western hegemony in the Middle East. Let's talk about the hard reality of the unreasonable ceasefire. To the West, a ceasefire is a humanitarian necessity. To a realist, a ceasefire is a tactical pause used by the stronger side to cement its gains and by the weaker side to rearm. Iran sees the current proposal as a way for Israel to pause its operations in Gaza, relocate its heavy brigades to the northern front, and finish off Hezbollah. Why would Tehran agree to that? In the cold logic of war, you do not give your enemy the time to reposition his forces for your own destruction. Iran has decided that if there is to be a fight for the future of the Middle East, it should happen now, while they still have assets on the board and while the U.S. is distracted by a domestic election and global overstretch. The logistics of this coming conflict are staggering. The U.S. is currently burning through its stockpile of interceptors at a rate that is unsustainable for its industrial base. The production of the SM-3 and the Patriot missiles cannot keep up with the consumption rate in a high-intensity conflict. Iran, conversely, has built a decentralized, low-tech, high-volume production line for its drones and missiles. They are fighting a 21st century war with a 20th century industrial mindset. Mass beats precision if you have enough mass. This is the nightmare scenario for the Pentagon, a conflict where the enemy's cheap weapons outpace our expensive defenses. As we move forward, the question isn't whether there will be a strike, but what the map looks like after the dust settles. If Iran strikes and succeeds in penetrating the most advanced defense network ever assembled, the myth of Western technological invincibility dies. If they fail and their missile force is neutralized, the regime in Tehran faces an existential crisis that could lead to internal collapse or a desperate rush for a nuclear deterrent. Either way, the framework that the U.S. tried to preserve is dead. It has been replaced by a raw competition for survival. The strategic depth of the Islamic Republic is its final shield. Its sprawling geography, its underground facilities, and its ideologically committed proxies form a defensive web that is incredibly difficult to dismantle without a full-scale invasion, something no one in the West has the appetite for. Iran knows this. They are playing for time, for leverage, and for the right to be the undisputed regional hegemon. By calling the ceasefire unreasonable, they are demanding a new world order in the Middle East, one where Tehran's interests are not just considered, but feared. In the final analysis, we must recognize that we are witnessing the breakdown of the rules-based order in real time. Power is returning to its most primal form, the ability to kill and the ability to endure. Iran has looked at the American-led system and decided it no longer provides security. Israel has looked at the threat and decided it no longer allows for compromise. The U.S. has looked at its commitments and realized it is running out of options. The result is a region on the brink of a systemic reset. In this game of great power realism, there are no moral victories. There are only those who control the terrain and those who are buried in it. Tehran has signaled that it is ready to test the limits of American power and Israeli resolve. They have laid their cards on the table. They have accused, they have rejected, and they have prepared. The next move will not be made in a conference room in Geneva or a briefing room in Washington. It will be made in the fire of the batteries and the flight paths of the drones. The world should stop listening to the diplomats and start watching the satellite feeds. The movement of the launchers tells the true story. The buildup of the interceptors defines the stakes. When the logic of the deal fails, the logic of the missile takes over. Tehran has decided that the unreasonable path is the only one left. In the high-stakes theater of the Middle East, the curtain is rising on an act written in steel and blood. In this world, peace is not the absence of conflict. It is the equilibrium of terror. And that equilibrium has just been shattered. The echoes of this decision will be felt far beyond the borders of the Middle East. From the gas pumps in Europe to the strategic planning rooms in Beijing, the collapse of this framework is a signal that the global watchdog is losing its bite. If the U.S. cannot enforce a ceasefire in a region it has dominated for decades, its credibility as a global guarantor of stability is finished. We are entering a fragmented, multipolar world where regional powers like Iran can defy a superpower and live to tell the tale. This is the new reality, hard, cold, and unforgiving. As the sun sets over the Persian Gulf, the silence is heavy with the weight of what comes next. The framework is a memory. The unreasonable has become the inevitable. In the end, only one thing remains certain. In the contest between words and power, power always has the final say. Tehran has placed its bet. Now, the world waits to see if Washington and Jerusalem have the nerve to call it. The board is set. The pieces are moving. The time for talking is over. The time for the kinetic truth has arrived.